Me, 20.
20, and so this is like in 15 or 16 months.
20, yeah, exactly. 18 months, 19 months, Yeah, we've been,
86 charges
but
with 14 people
me and
in
7 other
18
members,
months
we've been hit a
after the
total
peace
of
treaty.
86 times, and 84 times been thrown out of court. They're just letting us know that
84 times thrown out of court.
if you try to stand up to us and you try to, stand up for your community, this is what's going to happen for anybody else that tries to stand with you.
You were recently shot.
Right. Multiple times.
Tell me about that.
I was out with a few brothers and sisters and my girlfriend, and I had dropped my daughters off at my sister's house along with a King Brothers daughter. And after the movie, I told everybody to go back to the apartment. This apartment was under 24-hour surveillance, 7 days a week by the Greensboro gang unit. I picked up my daughters and that King Brothers daughter. I went back to that house. There was a few brothers outside. I told my girlfriend and my daughters to go inside because I was dropping off that brother's daughter. And within a minute, there was a flash of a muzzle. I got shot in my back, and it came out my chest, and I got shot in my leg. I asked the Greensboro's gang unit
Another minute.
why they weren't there if that house was under 24 hours surveillance, and the gang unit officer said that we were pulled out of there 20 minutes before you got shot to do paperwork. So I believe that the Greensboro gang unit had something to do with my shooting.
When people hear the word gang, it conjures up an image a lot of times that is negative. Help reframe that for people.
We have a system that wants to keep educating people on false education. I mean, they sit here and they say that we're gang members, but we don't conduct ourselves as gang members. And this is just a tactic. This is a tactic by the system to keep us from doing the work that we're doing in the community, keep us isolated, because part of their job is to isolate, and after they isolate us from the community, then they suppress. Then nobody's gonna ask no questions once we start falling, and basically when I say falling, I mean murdered. Everybody just turn their cheek and say, well, there goes one less gang member we have to worry about in our community. I don't define any group as a gang. I see them as street organizations that are being misled. And that's part of my teaching. This is what I do. When I sit there and I educate and I sit at that table with these brothers and sisters, I remind them of why we started. We didn't start by selling drugs. We didn't start by robbing. We didn't start by murdering. We started to keep the system, which is the police department, from coming into our community and oppressing our people, using this mental slavery that keeps us divided, that keeps us broke down, that keeps us in poverty. This is what we about. This is why we out there struggling and showing the system that we are not gonna back down, that we will fight with our last breath. My hope and dreams is to change this two-tier citizenship, having people up here and people down here and bringing them in together and everybody just being treated equal, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. That's my goal, that's my dream, and that's what I want to see, and people to stop looking at us by, where we come from, our color, how much money we make, or, just things of that nature, where we live. I mean, I just want to see everybody be treated equal.
That's Jorge Cornell. I'm going to just do a fairly quick version of his story. I thought it was useful to take a zoom out because the real prompt here was one that I knew this person when I was in college. His organization was in the same town that I went to school in, and this peace treaty was highly supported by a bunch of faith and religious communities, in schools, city council members, and so this was all happening. It was really formative for me, and very illuminating to see this subsequent split of the community support and then this targeting by a standalone gang unit in a police force, which we now see too is also fighting for its own survival and relevance in targeting these people. And part of what's resonant to me about the story is that there's a lot of similarities to us being here, but some of the critical pieces are different. He's from the Bronx. Mother came from Puerto Rico, a country that is relevant to say that was being colonized by the U.S. and being drained of resources and forced migration into an unfriendly and unwelcome system as a single mother. Like many people here potentially, his mother got into drugs in the 70s in New York City, probably not unfamiliar to some people, and fell prey to addiction. She died of HIV/AIDS. He was in 7 foster homes and 2 group homes, and had a system of a total lack of support. And this is not a story we're welcoming the gray here, I guess. It's like, how do we get away from just the single, easy story of what it means to be a good guy, right? How do we understand and meet people where they're at if we're really trying to hit the roots of violence here? He joined the Almighty Latin Nation, which was undergoing a process that is detailed really powerfully in this documentary called Black and Yellow, where they were shifting from being an organization that arose to protect Latin kids in New York who were under-resourced and underprotected through using gang violence and drugs, and shifting to become a Black Pantherized militant community organization, a political organization that was actively being undergone. It's documented. He still left the organization and moved to North Carolina to get out of it, but felt hopeful that this organization was shifting and was becoming the source to protect people like him, kids like him, and started this chapter, as he mentioned, in North Carolina. And then in that, in just 2 short years, started brokering this truce. None of us here are really, maybe somebody is equipped to do that kind of work, right? You have to be someone who really understands experientially what's occurring in these communities, and why wouldn't we find ways to support these kinds of things happening, support someone like this, who's taking a stand and who's taking major risks of being the only public-facing gang member in the entire Southeast, really. You don't want to be public-facing if you're in that role, unless you actually have a purpose for it. He ran for city council twice with the support of all of this community support that he garnered. I happened to be there one time when my friend, who is from Newton, Jewish kid, went to Cambridge School of Weston, private school. He showed up and he was really close with Jay, and he said hi to him. And then Jorge was arrested and said that he was racketeering and was he was signing with other Bloods and Crips. And it was talking about Eric Ginsberg, my nerdy friend who I've known. There was I happened to witness some of the trumped up faulty charges that helped me understand more about what this means, that they got 86 charges in 18 months. What kind of information that was being sourced from, and why then there's typically about a 65% conviction rate, 2/3, right? This was all these charges that wound up being an 11% conviction rate. While meanwhile, he was someone who was looking out for all of these Latino kids who had stories like him, who were teenage boys are reckless in general, right? We know this from being parents or being one ourselves at some point, right? And to be someone who's willing to take on, he started a job placement agency, a job training program, figured out housing, was a financial backstop, was taking on really being a source of support and community activism for these kids. He was arrested ultimately on racketeering charges under RICO. So he was still treated as a gang leader and sentenced to 28 years in prison, where he is now serving about 8 years of a sentence. He was moved several times. They moved him as far away from his family as possible to totally rural Pennsylvania, just to sort of isolate him, right?
It's a federal case.
Yeah, it's a federal case.
And what was the RICO charge?
It's racketeering for some of the stuff. There were a couple of small crimes that some of the kids in his thing did. But what was happening simultaneously is that all of these charges were bleeding out all the financial resources of this organization and of these people, and they were forced into the informal economy. Some of these kids, they're 14, they're 15, they're 17. The whole system was set up through every stage of the lifespan, multi-generationally, to ensure that this person was winding up in jails, institutions, or death. That was the trajectory, and no matter the actions, no matter the courage and initiative shown and the risk being shown, this is the likely outcome that in fact was architected and followed through in King Jay's life. So I think it's a powerful story. For one, there's we all love the Vineyard because of community. We all rely on people. Maybe our activities include beaches and cocktail or sports or whatever. If another community has to survive in a different way and do different things, and is then harassed by the police in every step of the way. If your teenage boy is born under surveillance 24 hours a day, of course this is going to happen, right, in this way. And so I think this question also, is he a perfect person? No. Is there some petty crime in there? Maybe. I don't know, right? I don't know if any of the people in this 20 teenagers and young boys had some stuff going on. However, the real question here is, how are we equipping people who have the power to be this voice in the community, who are willing to take these risks and willing to work with a very difficult circumstance to offer grace and redemption and the role that can be played in this community to actually change our systems. So this pastor, who's a dear friend of mine, has something that he said really stuck with me. His understanding of his role, what it takes to make a positive change in the community is excellent. Jorge represents a conversation we need to be having. If we're talking about grace and redemption, we need Jorge in our community. And he's someone who to me speaks to he remains faithful, and he remains faithful. His case will be turned over, which frankly the stats don't support. You know, he's still very much, there's not much hope for him for that being overturned. He has 2 young daughters he's very devoted to. And it is what it is. He's supposed to actually call from prison, so we might get a call from him as possible, but it's hard to say. And I just hope that we can, moving forward, being the kind of people who can hold that gray and hold that not needing to not make a binary of things, and understand the context of what it means to be targeted in all these ways for all this time. And be really inspired. I'm inspired by him still. I'm inspired by his